All right, on tonight's second discussion, you've seen them on the streets, those small cars that just zip by with hardly any sound. Well, electric vehicles do certainly make heads turn, but there are also technology hurdles to overcome before the world graduates to all electric cars. That's right, India, of course, could have electric cars within the next decade, meaning bye-bye to petrol pumps. Ankit Tuteja reports.
The future of the automobile is electric, meaning electric cars will replace diesel and petrol vehicles and dominate the streets in the years to come. In fact, the journey has already begun. Not only the auto industry, but governments in many parts of the world have started to move towards replacing polluting cars with electric ones. The global plan to ban petrol and diesel cars looks something like this. Britain is set to ban petrol and diesel cars by 2040. Holland is set to phase out petrol and diesel vehicles by the year 2025, while Germany is mulling the option of electric only by the year 2030. The same target that India has set for an all-electric car fleet. And France will end the sale of petrol and diesel vehicles by 2040. While each country will move at its own pace, according to a report by a Stanford economist, Tony Seba, petrol or diesel cars, buses or trucks will not be sold anywhere in the world within 8 years' time. India too has been aggressively working on achieving an all-electric fleet. And it's interesting to note that the transition from petrol and diesel cars to electronic vehicles has begun in a small way in India. The government has invited global bids for 10,000 electric sedans. Cars must run up to 150 kilometers on single charge, and the idea is to make them available for use by the government departments. The government has also floated tenders for 4,000 charging points across the country. The mobility mission for 400,000 e-vehicles in India is also set for 2020. Electric cars have obvious advantages. They reduce environmental pollution, also reduce dependence on costly polluting fossil fuels, require low maintenance and help reduce noise pollution. The journey has begun. How long it will take will depend on what the technological obstacles are and how quickly and efficiently these are overcome. Bureau Report, WION.
All right, of course, we will come and get some perspective with our guests in a while, but I also want to bring in an auto expert. First up, we have Murad Ali Beg. He is an expert. Let's talk about the electric cars. I mean, different countries are coming up with various plans to ban the petrol and diesel cars that we see. How do you react to this move, electric cars only?
You see, basically, the idea to ban petrol and diesel cars is basically because there's no doubt that even though the auto technology has improved enormously, the fact still remains that auto engines, internal combustion engines, are polluting. And diesel engines with micro particle soot is now considered to be somewhat damaging to the health of many people. So therefore, there's a worldwide, there's a problem of the increasing cost of and the limiting factors of the availability of diesel and petroleum. But the main thing is the concern about pollution. Now, the second factor which came in was will electric cars be better? Now, electric cars depend on electricity, which is also generated by polluting electric supply companies, but those are very often in distant places where the effect of pollution in a city doesn't take place. However, the electric cars are much more efficient because all this energy goes to the wheels. In an internal combustion energy, nearly 70% of the energy goes in turning the crankshaft around and priming the engine for the next stroke. So therefore, the petroleum engine, whether it's diesel or petrol, is inefficient. Electric motors have been proved, electric vehicles have been proved to be very efficient, but the sheer cost of the battery packs and the limitations of how far a battery pack can drive a car has been a factor which has been a serious concern.
All right, Murad, let me also ask you, in terms of the electric cars, how promising do you find them? Sort of the pros and the cons, your perspectives.
That is successful elsewhere in the world, it becomes successful in India. But the electric car has not yet been very successful anywhere. The Tesla is the latest thing which is looking very promising. But the fact still remains that in most countries of the world, the infrastructure of being able to have charge points all over, of having quick charge systems are still not in place. And therefore, a few countries which have given a lot of priority to it have been able to make it. But this is still very much confined to certain cities, and it's not something which is available everywhere.
Well, India's government says every car sold in India from 2030, 13 years from now, will be electric. Now, while environmentalists are, of course, thrilled, the oil industry is concerned. In fact, India's economy is the world's third largest oil importer, spending about $150 billion a year. Now, a switch to electric cars could save the country $60 billion in energy costs. Now, cleaning up India's roads from petrol and diesel will also reduce air pollution. And more than 1 million people in India die every year because they breathe in toxic fumes. That's according to Greenpeace. The World Health Organization says that out of the 20 global cities with the most air pollution, 13 of them are right here in India. So switching to electric would also decrease the carbon emissions by about 37% by the year 2030. And it's not just India. Even China is pushing for alternative fuel vehicles to help with its pollution levels. Let's bring in Vinay Damia to the conversation again. Vinay, thanks for joining us. Now, India has invited the global bids for about 10,000 electric cars. They can run up to 150 kilometers on a single charge. Let's talk about the advantages, the infrastructure. I mean, is this realistically doable in India?
So I think it's a very exciting and welcome step, firstly. There are obviously a few things that we need to keep in mind when we usher into this new era. One of them is, as you rightly pointed out, the infrastructure. Can we build a dense enough network of charging stations all over the country? Thirdly, can we build electric vehicles for the mass market and therefore affordable? Can we, fourthly, build electric vehicles for public transport, and can we build electric vehicles for two-wheelers, which is, a much bigger share of the market than the luxury sedans. The last point I think to remember is obviously this will remove India's dependence on certain kinds of fuel. However, the lesson to learn from China in terms of electric vehicle is that the electric vehicle manufacturing process in China is less clean than it appears, clean from an environmental point of view, clean from a carbon footprint point of view. Unlike the US and Europe, where they have achieved half the carbon footprint of traditional vehicles, China hasn't yet been able to do so because actually manufacturing these batteries is also a very energy intensive process and has a massive impact on the environment. So India needs to be very careful of that and needs to learn from China and not to repeat the same mistake. Otherwise, the climate benefit that we're all assuming will not come.
All right, let me bring in also editor of Autocar, Harmar Sorabji, joining us as well. A recent study, in fact, done by a Stanford economist says the global oil business could even end by the year 2030 because of the hybrid and electric cars. I mean, how realistic do we see that? I mean, cities saying that they may even ban human drivers. Is this possible in the next decade or so?
Well, I think definitely the end of the combustion engine is near. I mean, we can see the end. When it will come really is the big question, because I think what everyone is waiting for fundamentally is a breakthrough in battery technology. And you need the big breakthrough in terms of charging time and cost. I don't think range is so much of an issue. You're getting cars with a fair amount of range, but it's just the overall charging time which doesn't make them practical as yet. So I think the minute, battery technology, and it is advancing, I don't think it's unrealistic to expect the internal combustion engine to die sooner than later. It's hard to predict when that will happen. Obviously, it depends on, as I said, the technologies. You need the economies of scale for batteries to become much cheaper. All that is happening. But I'd just like to add one more point, just bringing in electric cars and replacing them with replacing the internal combustion engine isn't going to solve the air pollution problem, especially in places like India, because I think 90% of the pollution comes from old vehicles. And there's no real political will to get rid of these old vehicles, get them off the roads. We're just tackling the clean end of the problem, not the dirty end of the problem, which is really these clunky old vehicles, which really do need to just be completely scrapped.
Absolutely. You bring up a good point there, Hormuz. Let me also ask you, it's not just electric cars that may solve the pollution problem. I mean, what about our factories, the buses, other means that also cause to add the toxic airs in and around India, especially the big metropolitan cities like Delhi and Mumbai?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think, I'll be honest, I think the car has been the whipping boy of all environmentalists. It's seen as a capitalist tool. It's a rich man's tool. So, it is quite fashionable to keep, whipping motor cars. But I think, the current technology, even on petrol and dare I say even diesel, is really pretty clean. It's not as hazardous as people make it out to be. It's not really that big evil that people make it out to be. It's really the old vehicles which are really causing the problem. And that really needs to be solved before anything else.
All right. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but that does it for this discussion. A quick moment to thank all of our guests for weighing in, Vinayak, Hormuz, as well as Murad. Thank you so much for your perspective on electric cars. We'll have to wait and see if and does it becomes a reality here in India. Well, that does it for this bulletin on WION, World is One News. You can track all of our stories on our digital, mobile, and social media platforms. I'm Archit Seshadri. Thanks so much for joining us. Good night.